Tonight, we are going way back in time. We're going back to 1984? Like, I have it posted everywhere. It says 1984, so we're going to go back to 1984. I couldn't read in 1984. We are going to be playing a game called King's Quest, as it says right there. In fact, King's Quest was a educational adventure point. They call it point and click, but honestly, it was DOS prompts, and you will see what I mean. To do your action, you had to type in the command. Prior to this, the games you would have, they would have words, and the words put together to make sentences, paragraphs. But you get a text box. It'd be like, you've walked into this room, and you see a window that is bringing in cold air, and then a light is on in the next room, and you could type in, go to next room. You could type in close window, and if you typed in one that actually made sense to the programming, it would be like you went and closed the window. And that's how you would play the game. Well, King's Quest brought that up a step. King's Quest was like, what if we add visuals to this, huh? Just imagine, like, visual experience. Like, you'd see color, and you'd be able to move somebody, and then you could still type in the DOS prompts on top of that. And so instead of having an X button, Y, R1, R2, L2, L1, instead of having those as your intellectual options, you could actually type out sentences, which would require you to have to be able to spell basic words. Again, in 1984, I didn't have those capabilities, so I actually never played King's Quest 1. I've never played King's Quest 2, but by the time King's Quest 3 came around, my older brothers were playing it, and I fell in love with it, and I learned partially to read, or this was one of the many things that I was learning to play that was beyond my reading level when I was starting to play the game. And so I told Collywoggles about this, and somehow it came up, nostalgia and conversation, and I found out it was on Steam, and she's like, I want to buy it for you. So Collywoggles went ahead and bought me the King's Quest series. And we'll get into these great stories as we go further along. Because I played King's Quest 3 in its entirety. Actually, I beat it at like age... Well, I guess we'll find out when we find out the release date, but that's a story for a different day. But King's Quest 3 I've actually beaten. King's Quest 4 I've actually seen. King's Quest 5 was ported over to the original Nintendo, so I think I still physically own it. If I had a capture card, I would almost consider playing it. Almost. But I already own it on Steam, so we're just going to play it that way. And then King's Quest 6 or 7 I'd gotten on my Macintosh, and it came in on like 8 floppy disks, which were actually 3.5 hard disks. And then I never played 7, that completes this set. And then I guess they made an 8th one, so if I'm really feeling it, we'll have to hunt that one down later. Moving on, let me actually pause this for a second. I don't think you appreciate yet what the Apple IIe is. Let's roll the film. So I think what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a little bit of information about the Apple IIe. In my Discord channel, I was inaccurate in my statement in saying that, hey, the Apple IIe was just a fine quality piece of work with 8K of memory. And I was incorrect. It's actually 64K of memory. Remember, it takes 1000K to make 1 megabyte and 1000 megabytes to make 1 gigabyte. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's not a lot of data. But let's listen to this strapping gentleman. This is the, I'll scroll down so you can read it. This is the Apple IIe, the most personal computer, 1983 commercial. The vintage 1983 promotional video from Apple introduces the Apple IIe, includes footage of Steve Jobs introducing the computer. Look at him. Look at him. There's the Mr. Jobs himself. Because you know it's important talking? when you do the thumb thing. You know, politicians do this. Like, I know, where they're always like, let me tell you. like a remote control. Like they're pointing a magical wand. Steve Jobs had two, I guess. Anyways, I'm excited for this because I only watched it long enough to go, oh my god, that's totally what this is, but I haven't watched it yet myself. So he is going to, just like E3, just like any of your other promotional things, in the next 2 minutes, we're going to find out from him just how amazing the Apple IIe is. Now, to clarify, the Apple IIe, there was just an Apple II computer, which means there's probably was an Apple I. The Apple II computer came out in 1997. Sorry, 1977, same year as Star Wars. 1978, somewhere in that fiscal year. The Apple IIe came out in, I guess, 1983. So 6 years later, they had advanced it, which means, I guess, the Apple IIA, B, C, and D just kind of, and then so 1983, we get the Apple IIe. Before I give any information, I'll let Steve explain it. And whatever Steve misses, I'll just pick up afterwards. Because, I mean, let's face it, he didn't own an Apple IIe. Because by the time we were playing with an Apple IIe, he probably like had a hybrid Apple III. There he is. Look at him. Look at him. Oh my god. The solution is worse than the game. Go for it, Steve. Tell us what you got.
So what you're probably wondering is why we call it the Apple IIe and not the 2 plus plus or the 2 plus extra plus or even Mary or Diana. Well, the E stands for enhanced. We've redesigned the Apple II, made it simpler, more reliable, and enhanced it with built-in features that are important to today's users. What we've done...
Hey God, what is this? Collywoggles, when did you come in? I feel like this is an opportunity for me to back up. So this is, according to the top quarter, just now, this is the Apple IIe, the most personal computer, 1983. This was the original promotional commercial put out by Steve Jobs, like your classic E3 like showcase of the Apple IIe computer. I want people to appreciate just the majestic technological advancements that we were using at the time when King's Quest came out. Anyways, let's get back to Steve. Steve Jobs with hair, telling us with 2 sets of hands with 2 thumbs, like this, the amazingness that is the Apple IIe. Not the Apple II, the Apple IIe, E being enhanced. I just learned that. Here we go. 76. Steve, do it again.
So what you're probably wondering is why we call it the Apple IIe and not the 2 plus plus or the 2 plus extra plus or even Mary or Diana. Well, the E stands for enhanced. We've redesigned the Apple II, made it simpler, more reliable, and enhanced it with built-in features that are important to today's users. What we've done is to make the most popular personal computer ever used in business, homes, schools, and laboratories even more useful for these markets. First, we made it more powerful to handle larger tasks and more sophisticated programs. The Apple IIe has 64K of user memory, and the ROM has been boosted to 16K.
Boosted.
And we've added a powerful control program with BASIC built in, so the system comes up smart. We modified the keyboard to make it easier to use. It's now a standard typewriter keyboard with special keys, easy cursor movement, tab function, caps lock, and a host of other additions, giving the keyboard a full 128 ASCII upper-lowercase character set with 63 keys.
Can we just process this for a moment? He takes the keyboard. He's like, a modern keyboard, highly advanced, comes with a tab button, a cap locks. Like these were... Can you imagine back in 1982, there was a point in time that computers didn't have a cap locks, that didn't have a tab button. And then Steve Jobs comes by and he's like, in 30 years, I'm going to blow your mind with the thing called a phone. means by allowing you to tab, it'll hit the spacebar like 12 times for you. Oh, this is glorious. I don't care if I'm the only one having fun right now. It's too bad. I also like the fact that the RAM has been boosted to, what did he say? Boosted to 16K. Again, 16K. 16K of RAM. 16. Let's do a little bit of math. I want people to remember that 1000K equals 1 megabyte. And 1000 megabytes equals 1 gigabyte. And let's realize that nowadays a computer probably can't run unless it has about 30, so you could probably still go off of 16. A decent computer can't run without at least 16 gigabytes. Yes, 16K. Well, Steve, in the matter of 70 seconds, you've blown my mind. I can't wait to find out what's going to happen in the next 50 seconds. Let's go.
Also, an upper lowercase display is standard, so you never have to add a lowercase accessory. And we're offering a low-cost, plug-in 80-column card, developed especially for the IIe. But that's not all. Improved peripheral ports make connecting cables to peripheral cards easier. You can even lock the top to keep prying fingers out. Plus, the IIe has an even more reliable design. We've dramatically decreased the number of components necessary on the motherboard, which is to say, we've increased reliability and made service even easier for you. The product's introduction has been carefully orchestrated to ensure that the IIe follows in the distinguished footsteps of the Apple II. In fact, to become the most personal.
Friends would walk up to me and just be like, "What the f is in your mug?"
Yes, there we go, folks. Oh. Go back to regular view. I gotta turn the autoplay off, which I always forget how to. Autoplay is off. Why was it? So that, folks, is the Apple IIe, which we're gonna get into in a little bit. I just gotta skip through some more stuff for you. So this here, and like he talked about just the computer, you never even got to see the monitor. I had to flip through a lot of YouTube and a lot of Google images to find the computer that looked the closest to what I grew up with. Because even though you had the Apple IIe, this thing, even though you had the Apple IIe, there were like the monitors, there were different monitors, the whole body, like this one I like. This one has kind of like an off gray look to it. I've seen some that already look like you know how like when you buy a book, when you get a brand new book and the pages look all like, you know, magically white, and then you get an older book that's been sitting around since about the same time your grandma was born, and the pages are, you know, about the color of this Post-it. Yeah, so Apple IIes kind of did that too, where they started to get like this brownish yellow look. Mine never had that. And the monitors, I've seen monitors where like the hard drives were different side, like the hard drives are on that side now. I'm gonna have to slow this down for you folks, because I imagine a lot of you might be like, oh yeah, we don't really use CD-ROM anymore. So let me rewind that. Most people are like, oh yeah, we really don't use a disk drive anymore, or like a CD drive. And it's like, well, okay, let's back that up a little bit. Before the CD drive that would just slide right into your computer, you'd have to have it as an external thing called a CD-ROM. And prior to that, before we had CDs, we had discs. So imagine, let's see if I can describe a disc for you, for those who might not know what a disc is. Imagine there's a 3.5 floppy. So imagine, actually, probably a disc maybe like this size. Maybe it'd come down just a little bit longer. And then it basically had like a floppy black record inside. You know, like if you've ever taken open a hard drive, you know there's a hard drive that spins. Nowadays we have flash memory, so it doesn't actually spin, but It looks like a 3D printer saved the icon. It kind of does, except for it just doesn't do the thing. But you take a 3.5 floppy and you put it in a 3.5 floppy disk drive. And even some of the older, like post year 2000 computers still had the disk drives built into them. Before the 3.5 floppy, they had a 5.5 floppy, and it was floppy. It was actually floppy, and it went into those drives on the corner there, and they were usually solid black. Like the front of it was black. They'd probably have a sticker on the top of it to tell you what it was, and you could even see the disk inside it. In fact, this guy has a lime green floppy, so let's give him just a few seconds. Ready? Here we go. Oh. Yeah, there we go. That's a 5.5 floppy. Notice the little slot on the when you were to flip it around correctly. Okay, so that black part there, that little part there, that's actually the part that would go in, and that entire inside. So you got your 2 lime color coatings, and then you have a different material in the center, and that different material is like a CD. It's somewhere between a CD and a vinyl record, and that thing would actually spin, and it would be reading off of those openings, and that's what your computer would run. So you would slide that into that slot that you see a little bit off to the right in the background, and you'd flip the thing down, you'd lock it, and then it would read your stuff for you. Technology at its finest. And yes, it's super floppy, and the notch in the top corner there is to, one, help you know which side's supposed to go in. And here's the brain breaker on this one, is each floppy was actually 2 floppies, because like a vinyl record, you could flip it over and put the back side in. So front side would be side 1, side 2, or you'd have disc 1, side A and B. Yeah, so I think like King's Quest came on like 4 discs. Which is cool, because if even going into the PlayStation era, you kind of still got that same vibe when you would play like Final Fantasy 7 or 8 or Legend of Dragoon or something like that, where it's just this epic game that required like 60 hours worth of gameplay, and you knew you were making progress. When finally you'd beat a boss, you'd see this cool cutscene, and then it'd go to like a black and white screen that would just say like insert disc 2, and you're like, yes, I've made progress, I'm into the 2nd disc already. And it was kind of a way to measure the game. Same thing with the floppy is, now I think about it, King's Quest had 3 discs, so there's 6 sides. Because I remember getting onto like disc 5 and disc 6, so anytime you put in a new disc, you're like, oh, we're going into uncharted territory here. What's going to suck about this experience is that I'm not going to get that opportunity. I'm just going to go to the next part and be like, I guess I haven't been here before. So I lose a little bit of the nostalgia, and you lose a little bit of the what the hell is this kind of experience outside of the game itself. So watch. This video is 3 minutes long. This guy's going to do some coding and stuff. I'm not really interested in that, but I just wanted you to see that one. This is the one that looked the closest to my computer. Because I've seen ones where like the drives are basically pushed together and shoved underneath the monitor. I've seen ones where it looks like the disk drives are built in right next to the monitor, and it just gets into this clunky mess. But my experience is what you got here. So you got the computer, the monitor, and the thing on the side. Now, last thing I'll bring up is the Apple IIe. By the time those monitors came out, you got one of 2 options. Option 1 is the computer would only have one color, green. You would have green, as you can see here, and then black. But you can tell, because it's a tube monitor, like a tube TV, that the screen is all tinted green anyways. The more highly advanced ones I'd have to look it up, but I think it's 8-bit color. And when you have 8-bit, 16 different colors. Your box of crayons that you were using in kindergarten had more colors than this computer could produce. See? So it goes right in there. You push it in, you close the thing. When you boot it up, you can see the little light flash. Yeah, it's on. That means it's spinning. Apple IIe pops up in the corner. Data version? Yes. Loading. Yep, let's see if I can skip ahead to see if they're... Yeah, like the coding of this is just awesome. That's like all the data. Yeah, like I said, so this one's kind of boring because he's just typing code. But I wanted you to at least be able to see what the computer I had looked more like. So we're going to actually watch a little bit of this one. This is the Apple II, not the Apple IIe, just the Apple II, but very reminiscent in style. And you'll get a little bit better appreciation of just what it looked like. Look at that. Apple II came out in 97 or 98, which again, and you can, as you see this scroll through, you'll actually get to see the video game. I'll actually probably just click around. Yeah, this is one of the first Apple IIs, not later ones. The reference manual, like this, somebody did an unboxing. Like they must have almost recorded this, like in, I don't know, back in the day, and then was like, oh my god, it's an unboxing video. Like this guy was ahead of his time. So for you computer nerds out there, this is prime time. Ooh, serial numbers, even black serial numbers. But yep, there's your whole computer. Like I said, everything kind of uncomfortably stacked. Yeah, can you hear it? The when he boots it up. Look how uncomfortable that keyboard is. Simple basic program runs through. Yep, okay, let's see. Can we... Yeah, we got some coding here that you're doing. Sometimes if you booted the game wrong, you would get the coding and you're like, that's not what I was looking for. But most games, once you got to them, like this is fancy screen because you got like the banner at the top that they made by using the asterisks, and then you get to choose, like if I want to edit file, I type in E. Yeah, look at that, now he's switching disks. Yeah, well, you're not being very careful with that, buddy. Anyways, so let's go. Ooh. Yeah, there we go. There's the game loading. Yeah. Oh, let's zoom out for this one. Check it out. This 1981. So you can thank me. We're actually going to be playing a newer game than that. This one's going to be 1984. And to save you all some pain, it's actually going to be in 16 color. The glorious it's not loading right noise. He'll get it up and running. This, yeah, see? Look at that. That's what I did for fun as a kid. He's not moving. Oh, it's because he's not actually hitting the keyboard. There we go. So that, folks, that's the magic that is the Apple IIe. So let me get the background jams jamming, and we will begin. Actually, what I'm going to do is before I get the background jams going, nope, I lied again. I want to give you a little bit of background about King's Quest in general. So what we're going to do is we're going to read. That's what we came here for, right? We wanted to do some reading. Let me get some music going. Any thoughts, comments, concerns, questions that you think I would care to hear? This is your time. I know it's a little bit of culture shock, but I figured before we started playing the games, we would kind of journey through the evolution of the technology involved with it. You sound like a professor. This is actually a Gator lecture. I didn't necessarily mean for it to be, but it's turning out that way. I needed this though. Today was a little rough. I sound like I always sound like a professor. I can't turn it off. I really can't. I'm like a sarcastic professor, you know, like a science teacher.